everybody, it's Bob Smith. This is the Outdated Wrestling Hour podcast. I want to make an announcement here. You're going to hear this little placard in front of all of our shows for the next month or two. Because I am having some relatively complicated surgery and don't know how long I'm going to be off my feet, we have recorded about a dozen podcasts in advance of the surgery and post-haste, because I don't know how long the recovery period is going to be. So if we make any references on these shows to, well, stuff that's already happened or stuff that was several weeks ago, forgive us. It's simply a situation where we had to do what we had to do to get these shows finished. Hey, enough of my yakking. Let's have some fun. It's the new Outdated Wrestling Hour podcast. We now return you to our regularly scheduled program. It's your one-stop shop for great wrestling. It's the WrestleCopia Podcast Network. Ray Russell brings a host of great shows right to your device. There's the Wrestling Memory Grenade, Regional Wrestling, the Wrestling Stoop with Bob Roop, the Amazing Puro Academy Show, Retro Wrestling Review with Gene Jackson, Dave Dynasty's long-running hit, Wrestling Nostalgia, Monday Warfare, Raw vs. Nitro, the hilarious Other Ship podcast, and a whole lot more. Great shows and great guests, but where do you find all this stuff? Really simple. Try logging on to WrestleCopia.com. As I like to say, it's your one-stop shop for great wrestling memories.
It's the Outdated Wrestling Hour.
Hi, everybody. My name is Bob Smith, and welcome back to the Outdated Wrestling Hour. I hope everybody's doing fine. And this is a special edition. For the first time since year one, you're only going to hear my voice on my podcast. I gave everybody else the bum's rush. No, I'm just kidding. All of our friends, Steve Gennarelli, Brian Solomon, our co-host Joe Puccio, they are all in good stead. I am recording this particular episode because, well, on this week, when this show comes out, 2 days ago, I was scheduled for some pretty intensive surgery. And like I said before, it's probably going to knock me off my feet for a better part of a week. And my ability to speak may be compromised going into the future. So we have spent much of April and May just doing show after show after show to try to catch up and get us past the point of my convalescence so that when I return, we go back to everything being normal. But I do hope that the quality of the shows you've been hearing, the quality of our Outdated Wrestling Hour specials with Steve Gennarelli and with Joe Puccio, I hope you find them. I like the shows, and I don't think we're really missing all that much. As long as we have wonderful guests like those guys, I think everything's going to be fine. And during my convalescence, of course, I'm going to be working on getting more guests and more stuff together, working on the Outdated Entertainment Hour as well. Even if I can't talk, I can still work. Get yourself ready for some trivial stuff. Real minutia. You know, years ago, I tried to put out a blog called Mr. Minutia, which was just me talking about, well, a lot of esoterica. I encountered the usual coterie of creepy responses to things to the point where I said, blanket, I'm just going to throw in a towel on this. I think I did it for about 6 months, 8 months or something like that. And it took a lot of time. And you wouldn't believe how expensive it is to do a blog if you do it right. Everything costs boku bucks these days. So I said, I don't see any financial reward in this other than keeping my name out in a literary way. So I just said, the heck with it. And I scrapped it. So I always liked the concept of my nickname, Mr. Minutia, which was the name of the site. Of course, nobody knows what minutia means when they read it, but, this is America 2026 or whatever it is. It was fun to do, and I love esoterica. I love little nuggets of information. So we're going to go through a lot of that kind of stuff after the break here. We're really going to get into some stuff. I know I'm going to get everybody out there with at least two of these bits of information who go, I didn't know that, or I forgot that. And it's all old-timer stuff for the most part. So hunker down, what old-time foods can you have? What is it? You Bet chocolate syrup? Is that one of them, I think? And it's an old school thing. And what is it? It's not Comic Cleanser, it's Babo. Get some Babo out and clean your table or something like that. We will be back in just a couple of seconds with, Trivia Tumult. Just some stuff to wet your whistle and hopefully entertain you and make you go, oh yeah, a couple of times. We'll be right back after this word from, one of the greatest Rock and Roll Hall of Famers of all time. Would you agree with that? I certainly would.
This is Joe Walsh. One thing I do when I'm not playing rock and roll is get on the air as an amateur radio operator. Also called ham radio, is a communication service provided by ordinary people just like you and me. We have a national emergency communication system in place 24/7, 365. Find out more about amateur radio at arrl.org/What is ham radio? See you on the air.
Okay, are you guys ready for some really trivial stuff? I mean, none of this is important. But, trivia makes the world go round. And I'm a big fan of just searching for minutia when it comes to pro wrestling. Not the same stuff, not a list of championships. You can get that anywhere, I ain't much for fancy book learning. I just like minutia. So here's our introduction to, approximately 50 things that you may know, you may not know. I hope we can surprise you with a few of these. Things you might not know about old school professional wrestling, and the emphasis here is on old school for the most part. So, batten down the hatches, get an old school food like a German pretzel or some Ovaltine. Here we go. Something that proves I'm one of the strangest old school wrestling guys you will ever meet is my favorite wrestler of all time overall. Even though I didn't list it as this when we did the favorites, but in my heart, it's Baron Mikhail Cicluna, a guy who has been derided or misunderstood for years, but he had a great career, particularly in the late 60s, early 70s. Okay, most of you realize that the wrestler who became known as Baron Mikhail Cicluna, his real name was Michael Cicluna, and he really did hail from the Isle of Malta. He began his career as a sometimes fan favorite, sometimes bad guy named Mike Valentino, as he worked mainly in Canada in the 1950s and early 60s. It was in 1965 when he first came to the WWF, the Vince McMahon Sr. rebranded him as Baron Mikhail Cicluna. He was a giant in his day. They called him a giant at 6'6" and 265. Those were the days when guys weren't that big. If you didn't see Cicluna, he was a regal yet totally dirty wrestling bad guy who had a penchant for hiding foreign objects in his trunks. Now, after starring in the WWF, he ventured to Texas in 1970, working for NWA Big Time Wrestling and Houston Wrestling. Although if you look it up in some record books, you might not realize it. Because for some reason, in those territories, Cicluna, who was already a star on the East Coast, wrestled as Ripper Cicuna. Don't ask me. And Cicuna was spelled S-E-C-U-N-A. Ripper Cicuna, I do not know where he was billed from under that guise, but I'll never understand it. One more bit of Cicluna's trivia. Did you know he got a couple of WWF Intercontinental title match opportunities against Pedro Morales in 1982 when people thought he was washed up? Well, he did. And here's an even more unlikely match result from the late 1970s to 78. This is a match result in Japan. Baron Mikhail Cicluna and Bob Backlund teamed to beat Antonio Inoki and Ricky Choso. You can look it up, as they say. So you thought the 1980s WWF prelim guy Frankie Williams was a bum? Did you really? Now, according to our friend John McAdam from the Stick to Wrestling podcast, Williams once defeated Bad News Alan Coage, and I looked it up, and it's true. Now, here's other wrestlers that Williams beat, and I was there for 2 of these. You think he didn't win? You old school WWF guys, you got to put your thinking caps on to remember some of these names. He beat Jeff Craney, Fatu, Tony Colon, Pete Williams, Miguel Feliciano, Fred Marzino, Steve King. He beat one of the 900 Dr. X that were running around. He beat Johnny Rivera. That's got to be an upset. Beat Mike Masters, later known as Rocky Jones, Paul Figueroa, Frank the Gypsy Rodriguez, Tony Russo, Johnny Rods by DQ, another upset. Frankie beat Pinky Larson, but who didn't? He beat Moose Monroe, Jose Estrada. That's an upset. He beat the Golden Terror, Joe Turco, Tony Altimore, Pete Doherty, and a bunch of others. I stopped there. I have to insist that despite his sad sack demeanor, Frankie Williams had skills. And once again, Roddy Piper was such a loudmouth punk. I talk a lot about the New York State Athletic Commission since I grew up around that state watching wrestling most of my life. And here's a nugget that's true that I never knew. Do you remember in '84 on 2020 when Dr. D. David Schultz slapped John Stossel twice and ended up getting suspended? Well, that was actually true. Schultz was immediately suspended. Now get this, by the actual New York State Athletic Commission Deputy Commissioner Marvin Cohn. So the suspension wasn't just for show, it was for real. Here's a couple of modern old-timers. I'm sure most of you know this, but maybe you don't. Mark Merrill, who is known by many fans as Johnny B. Bad and from his WWE stint under his own name, he's now a motivational speaker, and he appears in schools all over the country. People I know that have seen him said he's done a lot of good for him and spends much time talking to students on a one-to-one basis, which is really special. He's a great guy. I met him when he first started out at Johnny B. Bad. I want to give him a plug. Get more information at ThinkPoz. That's thinkpoz.org to find out, maybe you can get him booked for your local school or organization. He's a tremendous guy, and I hope to talk to him sometime in the future. That would be really interesting. Here's another young old-timer. A lot of people think of John Cena and wristwatches, and they think of those plastic kid watches that WWF put out years ago, right? But in real life, Cena has an amazing collection of watches. I mean, I'm a watch collector, and this guy, oh my gosh, he's got it all. He's got some coveted Rolex models, meaning real rare ones. He's constantly being written about in fashion magazines, or at least men's fashion magazines, and watch websites as well. If you want to check it out for yourself, look for articles on this subject at SwissWatchExpo.com or Esquire.com. Or just type in John Cena watches in any browser and you'll see this guy's got some taste for the bling, man. I'm telling you, some really, really beautiful pieces. I wonder if any of you guys out there collect watches and stuff like that, or just into the watch scene. It's the type of thing I think guys do, but they don't talk about it. I don't talk about it a lot either. But I do like the fine craftsmanship and the heritage of some really good watches. And Cena knows his stuff. I really love this next nugget. This one really gets to me. I had no idea this was true or even anything about it. I know that former scientific wrestling star of the 50s and 60s, Ilio DiPaolo, gets talked about a lot by Bob 10 minutes from now on the show as it opens, right? But Ilio DiPaolo is famous for a second reason. Now, the old school Matt Starr opened Ilio DiPaolo's restaurant and banquet facility in Blasdale, New York in 1965. That's Western New York. It remains a popular Italian-American spot and event space to this day. Now, before you show up with Buff Bagwell t-shirt and a championship belt, be informed, okay? This isn't a wrestling-themed restaurant in the least. It's a fine dining establishment, and nowhere is the fact that DiPaolo was a wrestler in any way, shape, or form promoted by the restaurant. But it is kept open by his heirs and the people who run it now, and I have been told the place is spectacular. I just find it interesting that the place Ilio DiPaolo founded at the height of his career is still running strong, which is a beautiful thing in and of itself. Ilio DiPaolo's restaurant in Blasdell, New York. Now, for those looking for a wrestling-themed restaurant with good food and a real ring theme, come to my town, New York City, and try the Squared Circle Cafe. You can read about it at the Squared Circle Cafe NYC.com. This is one that Joe Pucci and I have got to try. We got to get out together and try this one. It hasn't been open long, and its hours are kind of peculiar. They open from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. just on weekdays. So it's basically breakfast and lunch, and it's closed on weekends. But it really sounds interesting. I'm going to have to investigate this place, bring my camera and a tape recorder and see if I can talk to the people behind it. The menu is full of wrestling-themed delicacies, and there's a bar that with specialty drinks that are based on wrestling stars and moments. Very, very interesting. Again, it's the Squared Circle Cafe NYC.com. Grab yourself a body slam burger or whatever at the Squared Circle Cafe in the heart of Manhattan. Who knew? I had no idea. Go back to the cartoon era of the WWF or WWE, whatever they called it way back when in the 90s. And, I didn't know that some of the guys' characters that they gave them were based on kind of who they were. Like Steve Karen was Skinner. And he really was an animal trapper and, well, Skinner. I had no idea until I talked to him in person. Then there's Bob Holly. He was dubbed Sparky Plug, what a name. Dressed like a car driver. Well, he really was a professional car driver. I did not know. He started his driving career in 1992 in Mobile, Alabama at the Mobile International Speedway. He drove a 1974 Chevy Malibu, and he placed fifth in 1992 for that season and won the 1993 season there. Being not a car enthusiast, I don't know what that means. All I know is he's the best at what he did. And I'll tell you what, when he finally became Bob Holly or Hardcore Bob Holly, he was a really, really terrific wrestler. And you forgot all about Sparky Plug. Something people tend to forget about Ric Flair is back in 91. He was still the WCW World Champion when he quit and moved to the WWF. And then Jim Herd made the announcement that Flair had been, quote, stripped of the title. Remember the reverse? When Medusa left the WWF and when she was champion in 95 and moved to WCW, and she was famous for throwing her title belt in a trash can on an episode of Monday Nitro. Holy smokes. Both of these moves have been described as either desecrating wrestling tradition or bold promotional tools that were brilliant. I think they could be both at the same time. You decide on that one. This unbelievable. I'm sure you knew and remember both of those very, very well. Now, fans of our age remember Bobo Brazil. Did you know he played pro baseball? He played under his real name, Houston Harris, and he was a member of the House of David, a barnstorming team based in Benton Harbor, Michigan. That was his hometown. Always billed from there, too. Now, contrary to some reports, this was not an official Negro League team. Some people said he played in the Negro Leagues. That's not really the case. It was a traveling team known for its, really good players, and they used to have comedy pepper games. They toured all over the United States, and they often defeated real minor league and Negro League teams. And they'd walk into a, Negro League stadium and beat the existing teams. I guess they were sort of like a precursor to Eddie Feiner and his King and his Court. You remember them, the traveling softball team with just, I think, 4 players, and they would beat virtually every team they took the field against, including major leaguers and everything else. Well, let's hear it for the House of David touring barnstorming baseball team featuring Bobo Brazil. I never knew that. Remember Dennis Knight, known as Midian, and Tex Slazenger, and about a half a dozen other names during a pretty long and pretty good career. He's now a respected chef. Did you know that? After he left wrestling in 2006, he worked at something called the Sand Pearl Resort in Florida, and he later ran his own private catering business, Dennis Knight Catering, which served the Tampa Bay area, Clearwater, and the surrounding towns there. Last time I checked on that. I'm not sure if it's still around, but he made a really big name for himself in the culinary world. I should have stuck this one earlier when we talked about Ilio DiPaolo. Let's talk about something that nobody talks about or even listens to anymore, the radio. I do. Anyway, in his younger years, Ernie Roth. And he was better known as a pair of really wicked bad guy managers. He was Abdullah Farouk and the Grand Wizard of Wrestling. Well, he was a disc jockey and a radio announcer in the Midwest, if you didn't know that. If you search for it on YouTube, the Wizard actually did color commentary on an old episode of the WWF syndicated show Championship Wrestling back in '83. He actually was the co-host of Vince McMahon at the announcer's desk. I never saw that show until recently. He sat next to Vince McMahon at the announcer's desk, and it was one of those episodes when Bob Backlund did the Harvard step test for most of the show. It'll make that one easier to find. More radio guys. Teddy Long, sometimes referred to during his managing and refereeing days in the NWA by Jim Ross as Theodore R. Long. That's a tongue twister. But anyway, he was a referee before he became a wrestling manager. Most people remember that. And eventually the GM of Raw when he moved on to the WWE. Did you know he was a good friend and a business associate of James Brown, the legendary R&B singer? Well, by the way, there's an album of James Brown that's kind of a budget record, and it's called 70s Funk Classics. Find it, get it. Everyone is slamming. Anyway, Teddy Long later became a radio guy in his youth, dabbled in radio, and he now has a podcast along with our good friend Mac Davis. Here's some personal trivia. I once had dinner with Bill Apter, Sid Vicious, and Teddy Long following an NWA card in St. Louis. So I'm sure none of them, including Bill, remember that. Well, how about some wrestlers who also served as referees before, after, or during their in-ring careers? Here's a few. Dennis Stamp, Brad Maddox. People remember that one, I would think. Pretty boy Doug Summers was a referee first. Jamie Dundee, son of Bill Dundee. The WWE Danny Davis. Jeff Jarrett was a ref. Scott Armstrong, of course. Billy Osborne, known to fans as Lil Abner Osborne in the NWF in the early 70s. And of course, Jim Ross. And there's a really cool picture of Jim floating around the internet right now. Svelte young Jim in his refereeing outfit. What a career in wrestling he has had. Who doesn't love Jim Ross? I'm telling you. Here's an oddball one. Brian Solomon made me look up Silvano Souza. He talked about him on a recent show, right? You know, he's mentioned here often for his 1980s WWF run, but I had no idea he was part of a tour of All Japan Pro Wrestling back in 1976. So, amazingly, a lot of the prelim guys from the East Coast also worked New Japan or in Japan. Frank Savage pretty much had a run as a jobber in the WWF in the 80s. He did a tour of New Japan Pro Wrestling in 1981. Not only scored some victories or faced or teamed with legends, he teamed with Mass Superstar. And he was in the ring with Riki Chosu and Mariyama Go and Kengo Kimura, Tatsumi Fujinami, and a bunch of other guys. It only goes to show you guys, there is no such thing as a jobber. If you have skills, you will work, and you'll work, as you can see, all over the world. Gorgeous George.
Gorgeous George. You remember Gorgeous George?
You know Bob 10 minutes from now does, right? But George Wagner was the toast of the 40s and 50s as one of pro wrestling's biggest attractions. How many people tried to cop his gimmick? Now, I insist there's a handful of them, but when I tried to research it was pretty hard to figure that out. But I know that there was a guy named Richard Phelps who used the names George Wagner and Gorgeous George Jr. in the late 70s for the Jarrett promotion in Tennessee. But reportedly, he was forced to drop that name under the threat of legal action from the widow of the original Gorgeous George when he tried to use the name in Los Angeles. My favorite Gorgeous George was the ravishing blonde who appeared out of nowhere as Randy Savage's manager in WCW. Do you remember her? Her real name was Stephanie Bellers, and her and Savage were reportedly a real-life item. She went on to wrestle a little bit after her WCW heyday in the 2000s. She later became known as George Frankenstein. Don't ask me, because I don't know. All right, let's go to What's in a Name? Yes, it's What's in a Name. It's been said that King Kong Bundy debuted in the WWF in 1985. In reality, he wrestled in the WWF most 81 under the name Chris Canyon, complete with a full head of brown hair. It was in 1982 in World Class when he first changed his name to Big Daddy Bundy, and things went on from there. We mentioned this on the show before. Early in his career, WWF legend Dominic DeNucci was known as Dominic Bravo when he wrestled in Canada in the 50s and 60s. Did you know former IWA and Canadian star Gino Brito and Louis Sudan with the same guy. Did you know Edouard Carpentier began his career as Eddie White's in 1950s in Canada? I didn't know that. Canadian strongman in the WWF in 76, Louis Cyr, but he was a big star in Canada as Gilles de Fiche Poisson. I don't know if I've ever pronounced that correctly. Gilles de Fiche. Poisson. I'm calling it Poisson. If anybody knows how to pronounce it, you can correct me and you win a prize or something. I don't know. This one surprised me. I did not know this. At the beginning of his career in Canada in the 60s, Stan Stasiak was billed as Emile Coverley, which was not even his real name. Emile Coverley. Stan Stasiak, the man, the hard punch specialist, as my friend Steve Gennarelli is so fond of saying and reminding me of. Now, there's more name stuff. There have been so many wrestlers who wrestled under mask as the Golden Terror. There are probably more Golden Terrors than the men I'm going to list here, but I know of these people. All right, so I'm telling you they're either wrestling names or their real names and who they wrestled for as the Golden Terror. Ben Alexander, the Southern NWA of the 1980s, was Golden Terror. The guy who was Mighty Joe Thunder, Bob Stanley or Bob Merrill, he got a shot against Bruno Sammartino in 64 as the Golden Terror. Now, the Golden Terror in the WWF in 78 was Pete Doherty. I thought that Dave Yohannan had some moments under the mask too, but I can't find any proof of that, so I think I'm wrong about that. Yukon Moose Sholok also wrestled as the Golden Terror while sporting a mask in NWA Capital Wrestling in the 60s. You know what that was? That was the precursor to the WWF. Frank Hickey, who spent many years as a spaceman, was also a Golden Terror in Texas in the 1960s. George Ballas, who was better known as El Medico, was a Golden Terror in Hawaii in the 60s. There was a tag team duo called the Golden Terrors in Memphis in 1971. Clyde Steves, better known as a member of the Enforcers, worked as the Golden Terror in the Pacific Northwest, the early WWF, Texas, Tennessee, and Washington State, and he may have been the most successful of all the Golden Terrors, working mainly in the 1960s. It's hard to say which of these three ring names got copped the most, Mr. X, the Executioner, or the Golden Terror. But that's a lot of terrors I just listed. There's got to be more Golden Terrors in this, given all the indies over the decades. How about them Giants, right? Everybody knows Andre the Giant, El Gigante, and the Giant / Big Show. Did you know Gustav the Giant, who used midget star Skylar Lowe as his manager in ICW in the 1980s? He also got to work in New Japan in the Central States, which shocked me because he's one of those guys where people just kind of bounce off him all the time. You probably remember Giant Haystacks, the British star. Well, he was a British star, but late in his career, he became Loch Ness in the WCW. During that period where they were signing everybody who would ever worn a pair of tights. Giant Silva was big in Japan and also worked in the States. And for some reason, Giant Silva also worked in New Jersey area indies. I can't figure out wrestling. I just can't. Also, anyone remember Giant David? That's what he was billed by. He was also... I laugh every time I hear this. Joshua Ben Gurion for the IWCCW. I remember they brought him in because I think they were doing Kutchers and stuff like that. I couldn't make this stuff up. I'll have to get the real story behind Joshua Ben Gurion, but there he was. Anyway, he was also known as Giant David because he was a big guy. Here is one for my co-host, Joe Puccio. Everybody, of course, remembers the legendary WWE Hall of Famer, The Undertaker. But do you guys remember the rotund but powerful tag team known as The Undertakers? Two big burly guys named Henchman and Punisher. They captured the ICW Tag Team Championships in 89 and 90. These were big, massive guys dressed in black capes with dark, spooky makeup. Gave them an eerie look. And they were given a big push, of course, in the Mario Savoli promotion. Under those capes, Joe, listen to this, were guys named Val and Tony Puccio from the Bronx, trained by the legendary Johnny Rods. They were as smart as they were macabre. They copyrighted the name The Undertakers in 1989. Allegedly, reportedly, okay? Now, after Mark Calloway debuted under the name The Undertaker in 91, reportedly the WWF reached a settlement that they would own the Undertaker name. In other words, they went to the tag team and said, "We will buy the rights to this name from you." Now, nobody knows for sure if the Puccios, it makes me laugh just to say it, if they received some sort of cash in the settlement. But they did get the opportunity to work for the WWF for a couple of years. They appeared on television a bunch of times and worked tag team matches and house shows. Val Puccio is also part of another trivia note, as he was one of the members of the original full-blooded Italians in ECW along with JT Smith. I think Mark Calloway went into a good moment or two as well. I'm not sure. The original Undertakers, if you knew that was such a thing. I remember covering them, and I forgot about them until somebody jogged my memory recently. Now, speaking of Johnny Rods, did you know that after his WWE career, he teamed with Jose Estrada and the World Wrestling Council in Puerto Rico as the Super Medicos? He also won the WWC Caribbean Heavyweight Championship during his post-WWE career. Of course, you know that last year he was inducted into the International Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame in Albany. He's also a member of the WWE Hall of Fame, and he's soon going to be on this show, so keep your ears open because I'm going to finally see if we can get our schedules to jibe, and I will get out there to Brooklyn and have a talk with multiple-time Hall of Famer Johnny Rods. Everybody misses Chris Candido. I know I do. He was a great kid. He really was a nice guy. One of the most exciting, popular young wrestlers of the 80s and 90s. He was the grandson of Popeye Chuck Richards, who worked with the Worldwide Wrestling Federation from 66 to 74. I had no idea that was true. Now, I first met Chris when I was on the road a little bit. I think it was at the Meadowlands when the NWA was there. And he used to be a ring guy, a ring crew member, and he used to set up rings for the NWA shows, or at least that show. And his then girlfriend, Tammy Sitch, I remember she'd sit at ringside with a paperback book. Can't make this stuff up. They were great. I was really happy to see them both succeed. I really was, especially Chris. I won't get into anything past that. You all know the stories of what happened later on. But they're both legends of the era in which they worked, and I will honor them with that statement. Who doesn't miss Chris Candido? Now, one of my favorites from the 80s also was Dr. Tom Pritchard. And no, he's not a real doctor. But this is cool. He adopted the name Doctor. He added the name Doctor during an angle in the South somewhere where he had injured his ankle and supposedly healed himself and said, "Look, I'm as good as any doctor. I'm Dr. Tom Pritchard," as part of his name, and stuck throughout pretty much the rest of his career, other than that thing with the body donnas and all that. I know wrestlers refer to him as Doc and such. So this was one gimmick that really worked all over the wrestling world to this day. Wrestling doctors, huh? If you're really old like I am, do you remember Dr. Beach, Dr. Emmanuel Beach? He was a preliminary wrestler in the IWA and other organizations during the 70s, right? And he may or may not have been a real physician for what I'm told, but I've never been able to pin that one down. Was he a doctor? An odd thing to call himself anyway. But did you know about Dr. Sam Shepard? And how many people these days don't realize that Mick Foley actually copped his famous finisher from Dr. Sam Shepard? Now, he was the guy. His story inspired the long-running TV show The Fugitive, which was on in the 60s. He was a wrongly convicted murderer who was later exonerated. After that, after he got out of jail, Shepard, who was somewhat athletic, he competed in a few dozen pro wrestling matches in the late 60s and early 70s, and his finisher was the mandibular nerve pinch, a hold that was designed to deaden the nerve under the tongue by placing two fingers inside the mouth, and the thumb applied pressure underneath the chin. A couple decades later, here comes Mick Foley debuting as Mankind in WWE, and he called his version the same hold, the mandible claw. At that time, when this was all going on, I was working at PWI, and I knew right away, where Foley and the WWE copped the move from. But unlike Shepard's hold, which had a basic and medical learning and medical training to get it from, I think Foley's move was just shove his fingers down his throat so he gagged. I really think that was all there was to it. I wrote a column on this for one of the London magazines right after Foley debuted as Mankind, but Dr. Sam Shepard. And he's not hard to find on the internet. Just type his name in and put wrestling, and you'll see pictures of him using the mandibular nerve pinch. the real name for the mandible claw. Now, here's something that is trivia and isn't. It's entitled 10 Really Bad Names for Some Pretty Good Wrestlers. Late 70s, the Iron Sheik appears in the WWF for the first time, billed as the Great Hossein Arab of Iran. That is how Gary Capetta introduced him. The Great Hossein Arab of Iran. A tongue twister. He was much better off being known as the Iron Sheik, for sure. Terrorizing became Triple H, eventually. I remember writing about old Terror when I was with PWI. I really did. I remember typing his name into match results for the old PWI Weekly. Those were the days. The Great Oz. Welcome to Oz. Welcome to Oz. Was Kevin Nash. And yet, well, he did pretty well after that. But Brad Armstrong, who was WCW's terrible Spider-Man ripoff in a mask and bodysuit known as Anachroman, he didn't fare quite as well under that guise. During the WWE's Attitude Era Slightly Dirty Joke series, poor Sean Stasiak, the son of Stan Stasiak, was Meat, known as Meat. I think he was named that by one of the women wrestlers. I don't even want to remember. He deserved better than that. I can't even imagine why they threw a mask on George Steele in the early 70s and called him the Student. Look online for photos of Steele, fur and all, with a mask on. It's so easy to figure out who that was. I'm pretty sure that was before he became George the Animal, but who could say? I don't know. Damien Demento, more WWE follies. The former Mondo Clean deserved better than that. That 70s guy, an awful moment for a really good wrestler, Mike Awesome. That 70s guy. Of course, the Vince McMahon abomination for another good wrestler, Droz, was once known as Puke. And I don't know if this guy was any good or not. He was a prelim guy for the East Coast WWF in the 60s. But how can you take a guy named Jolly Charlie seriously? I am sure that this is not a complete list, but let's give praise and hats off. I know this is not a complete list, but let us give praise to 10 professional wrestlers who are still with us at the age of 90 or older. As far as I can tell, these fellows are all with us. It's not a complete list. Here are 10 wrestlers who are over 90 years old. Guillotine Gordon wrestled in the Worldwide Wrestling Federation in the 1960s, and he also famously teamed with Ox Baker in the NWA, is 91 years old. Sammy Berg, a Canadian wrestler who was also a bodybuilder and an actor, is 96. Lady wrestler Ann Lake, who is a member of the New England Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame, is reported to be either 92 or 93 years old. Nick Kozak, big star in the Pacific Northwest and in Georgia, is 93. Jamaican star Dory Dixon, a major draw and one of the best wrestlers of his era, is 92. The legendary AWA wrestler and trainer Eddie Sharkey is 90. Former Mr. Universe Earl Maynard, who wrestled in the Worldwide Wrestling Federation and the NWA, is also 90. Legendary villain Horst Hoffman from Germany is also 90. And there was a guy named the Minnesota Farm Boy. Seriously, that was his ring name. He was active in the 50s and 60s. He's 94. And the original Paul Diamond, who worked in the AWA in the 60s and 70s, is also 90. Congratulations to every single person I just mentioned. That's really great. Now let's go to the other end of the spectrum. Wrestlers who started very young. This one's hard to fathom. Now, apparently, from what I'm reading, this wrestler began his career in Mexico in the pros and learned from his uncle, Rey Mysterio Sr. Supposedly, Rey Mysterio was 14 when he first hit a pro ring. Good heavens. And how about Paige, who just returned to the WWE? wrestled in her family's own wrestling league in England, the World Association of Wrestling, when she was 13 years old. I find this hard to believe. I'll report it, but I don't know if I buy it. Terry Gordy reportedly started wrestling at the age of 13 in 1974 as Terry Mecca. For Pedro Martinez's legendary IWA, which I used to watch on Channel 9 in New York City every Saturday at midnight. I can't imagine. I know he was a teenager, but 13, I know he's a big kid. There is a tape floating around of him. You guys tell me if that guy possibly could have been 13 years old, but that's what's being reported. Roddy Piper, Rowdy Roddy, was reportedly only 15 when he had his first matches under the tutelage of the Canadian promoter and wrestler Al Tomko. Also, this is what's reported. Piper's first match against Larry Henney, he got paid $25. That I believe. I don't know how old Piper was when he got that match, but I certainly believe it. And the infamous Fred Blassie had his first match in St. Louis at the age of 17. Aleister Black, a current WWE star, was only 17 when he started his professional career. Seth Rollins was 19 when he started his career in the Indies in Iowa. Shawn Michaels was also 19 when he had his first pro match. Early on, if you remember, he worked in Mid-South, World Class, and Central States. Edge Adam Copeland was 18 when he had his first match in his native Canada. And our last young wrestler for this segment, our friend Mick Foley. He was 18 when he started out in 1986. I was at a lot of his indie matches when I joined PWI in 1988, and it boggles my mind he was only 20. Born to wrestle, Mick Foley. Unbelievable. So there you have the old and young of it. Let's basically wrap up the trivia section with something a little bit oddball, all right? Where do ring bells for boxing and wrestling come from? So I looked into this a little bit. Some of these companies are really cool. You may want to even check these out. They're easy to find on the internet, and I had no idea. So here we go. It's like, I'm certain that WWE doesn't manufacture their own ring bells. Where do they come from? Well, there's a company called Bevan Bells in Connecticut that manufactures and sells a series of ring bells in various colors and sizes. They're meant for boxing and wrestling. You can also buy them direct from them or on Amazon. They make a 10-inch trip gong steel bell that looks like the real deal to me. And Bevan sells all kinds of bells from hand ringers to these larger bells. It's seriously fascinating. BevanBells.com. They have everything from finger bells to Christmas bells, you name it. All made here in the United States, right in Connecticut. What a cool company that must be to work for and be involved in. Seriously. Bevan even makes cowbells, so you can get one and relive the classic Dusty Rhodes versus Superstar Graham match from MSG, or not to mention scores of Tennessee and Texas classics. But Bevan Bells makes ring bells. There's also a company called Monster Rings and Cages. You can look them up online that sells bells that look to be very popular in pro sports in varying sizes, perfect for boxing and wrestling. They also obviously sell boxing and wrestling rings as well. Amber Fight Gear at ambersports.com sells a great 10-inch bell. Now, from what I've been told, a good 10-inch bell can reverberate throughout most arenas. I'll tell you what, a ring bell sounds like a cool... If a guy who has a wrestling den or man cave, get him a ring bell. Seriously. Now, you wouldn't want to ring it too much because they are loud, but I'll tell you what, they're easy enough to find. So try Bevan Bells in Connecticut, Monster Rings and Cages, and Amber Fight Gear. That's really cool stuff. All right, I'm going to wrap this up with something personal. It's not really trivia, but it's trivia about me. And the thing about the ring bells got me thinking about when I was a really little kid. When I was really small, it was an era where people who had enough skills were legally allowed to build their own houses. My dad was a complete do-it-yourselfer, and in the 1950s, he built not only the house that I grew up in, but also the house next door that my mother's parents moved into a few years before I was born. As I'm pretty lucky to have a good memory, I remember being with my granddad at the home next door that my dad built with his own two hands. My grandfather was standing in front of his TV changing the channel, right, with the knob on the set. Look it up, kiddies. We used to have to get up out of our chairs and turn the channel to one of the 2 or 3 stations we were able to pick up on the rabbit ears or on the outdoor antenna to watch television. When he saw the wrestling was on, he said something to me like, let's watch this dumb stuff. I'm sitting on the floor about 5 feet from the TV. I'm really young. And we started looking at the wrestling show together. I was really young at this point, maybe about 6 or 7, I don't know. I didn't really understand what I was watching. But when I turned around and looked at my Grandpa June, he was bobbing and weaving in his chair, rooting for the good guy in the match. At points, as we sit there watching the wrestling matches, he let out a wow or get him when the good guy would do something really good against the bad guy. That moment came back to me a few weeks ago as I was researching something else, and I've been thinking about this a lot. I really have been. All I know is this. My grandparents' house had a beautiful 5-foot-high standing wooden clock, cuckoo clock. It would chime in the hour and the half hour. The most beautiful bell sounds you ever heard. They had a big wooden tube radio about 4 foot high with what I swear is the best sound I've ever heard as they listened to stuff like WNEW AM from New York City that played music from time to time. They also kept birds that would tweet all the time. And they, like a lot of old people back then, kept bowls on tables that were usually full of Starlight mints or chocolate-covered peanuts or non-periles or whatever. My Aunt Leah lived there most of her life, and she'd always have a pet to come over and play with. To sum up, I cannot even put into words how I wish I could go over and just say hello to them one more time. And it was one of the first times I ever saw pro wrestling. Attention, Gen Xers. If you'd like to explore the era that appeals to you, look no further than GenerationXWire.com. The generation who grew up with elite in entertainment, music, movies, TV, books, pro wrestling, and more finally has a one-stop destination for all their Gen X needs. From Aerosmith to Batman to the Killer Bees to the Twilight Zone, there's something for everybody at GenerationXWire.com. You won't find a more eclectic mix of pop culture content than at the leading website that specializes in the greatest generation, GenerationXWire.com. Check it out today. Well, there we go. There's another outdated wrestling hour in the books. We really hope you enjoyed this one. I kind of had fun putting it together. It's different. I hope you like these little musical backgrounds and whatnot. And by the way, I just want to give one more shout out. And you can hear the entire theme song at the end of every show to Moran Ron Barron, who also goes by the name of MRB. Tremendous musician. He plays all those horns. I think he composes all the music. He is the artist behind our theme song, and I couldn't be happier with it. I know I have at least 5 people that I know who listen to the show who go, yeah, I do the same thing you do. I listen to the whole theme at the end. It's a really great instrumental. And I just acquired a new instrumental for the Outdated Entertainment Hour. So the next one of those that you hear should be a brand new song. I hope you like that one as well. I wanted something equally as funky as this one. You know what I'm saying, baby? Woo! Well, anyway, that's it for now. Write to us, outdatedwrestling@gmail.com. We really do welcome all queries and stuff like that. And if it's appropriate, I'll read some stuff on the show. Our website, outdatedwrestlinghour.buzzsprout.com. Find all of our episodes right there at the click of a button. And as my business model is running right now, I won't Patreon you for any of that stuff. All of our shows, you can listen to them anytime you feel like it. Also, you'll find out information about the Outdated Wrestling Hour fan club. I want to thank we got a couple new members recently. Thank you very much. For a nominal fee, you can help perpetuate the ongoing adventures of this podcast, as well as the Outdated Entertainment Hour. Love the one with Man Magazine, and we got another one coming up about a classic rock band that should be out by the time this one is out. At least, because they're going on a big comeback tour, and you're going to love it. It's going to be an amazing tour. I'm not going to tell you who it is. You got to check out the Outdated Entertainment Hour. Find me on Facebook. I'm the only Bob Smith that sings with B.B. King. That is the best way to find. There's a lot of Bob Smiths on Facebook, so just type in Bob Smith, see a long-haired, shaggy guy in the little circle, and then when you expand on that, you will see me on the left side of the page on the top, and most of the page is devoted to the great B.B. King, who I knew personally, and it was an honor of a lifetime. Facebook is my main jam for disseminating information, but we're also on X, and we're also on Threads. We're also on Blue Sky. Of course, Facebook. Instagram is kind of cool for getting the word out. I never mentioned Instagram. I should mention that more often. And so it goes. That's it. I don't want to hype you. I am hoping to be back sooner than later. I should be laying in bed moaning as you hear this. I'm not kidding. It is what it was. I'm not even going to talk about what kind of surgery, what's going on. It's not important. And please, please, no thoughts and prayers. Please save them for the truly downtrodden, the very sick, and the important people in your lives. Okay. Seriously, I'm fine. Until next time, my name is Bob Smith. You might remember me from the classic era, which, by the way, is not to say that today's PWI isn't great. It is. Get a copy at your local newsstand today or subscribe. I don't work there anymore. I have no financial stake in this. It's just a great magazine. It's so all-encompassing. Great ratings, great printing, beautiful slick paper, wonderful color photography. What more could you ask for about today's wrestling scene? It's PWI. I miss you guys. I miss it so much. Anyway, I'm Bob Smith. I used to work there. Like Ringo Starr says to everybody, peace and love, brothers and sisters. Peace and love.